it's fulfilling. If I could word for it, you know.
What? Sorry?
It's fulfilling.
Fulfilling.
Fulfilling, you know. It satisfies so many aspects of your thoughts and meeting and, you know, everything. And especially seeing Jimmy Muir again. I haven't seen Jimmy for years. He did his first play with us with the Jesuit. I was still at college. I first met him when he was at school, and he used to come and help us with Jimmy the Stag and the Black Oil. He himself and Jimmy Chisholm were schoolboys, and they used to carry us. Can we help out? Oh yes, carry out.
Nice cozy, yeah.
Feels like overdressed for this heat.
I'm wearing an armour under this man. This one, I'm going to Inverness and it's full of layers. Oh yeah.
My school is gone.
You can come this way. Dolly, this so
I've got a lot of stuff.
I should have given about how we could hunt him down.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
We used to sit in these rows, you know, see each other in the hall, staying with each other.
Yeah, and other girls wondering, oh, I want to become an actor.
I saw you come in earlier, but I was like, every time I looked up, you were looking away, and I was like trying to do your thing, and I was like looking forward as well. How are you? Good, how are you? Yeah, good. Excited? Yeah, it's nice to not have to be organising something and to be up here with like the outsiders so I know what I'm doing. I was here yesterday till 2 tonight and then away.
Got 2 minutes till 2. Whether just silent.
We're going to the one this evening, this afternoon evening as well. So we can maybe catch up in between. Yeah. Speech again.
Is that it? Right.
Oh, it's really fun. You're an answer.
Feature in the landscape.
If you're not doing anything after this, like, you can just read the chat.
We're running out of soup, just
Yeah, I don't want to do soup.
With Jim, I've done stuff with Jim before.
Can I start? Hello everyone. Thanks so much for coming. It's great to see you. Lovely turnout for this Speakout session. Welcome to the Spark Festival. Some of you here have already heard me droning on about this, but this is the very first time anything like this has happened in Inverness. A festival of new playwriting, essentially, where you get a bit of an insight into the development of new plays and new ideas for plays. And we thought it would be appropriate for such a gathering, which involves a lot of Scottish professional theatre practitioners, actors, directors, writers, technicians, etc., to have this series of what we're calling Speakout sessions, where we try to create some kind of element of provocation on a particular subject, get some illustrious people to pontificate on the subject, to speak on the subject, and then open the discussion out to you, the audience. This is very much a festival where we want audiences to participate, to contribute to the discussions we have about our discussions. We have a couple of latecomers who just arrived, more illustrious members of the audience, and I'm very pleased to see them. So thank you very much for coming, chaps. My name is Matthew Zadrak. I'm the Artistic Director of Dogstar Theatre Company. This festival has been produced by Dogstar in partnership with Eagle Court and Playwright Studio Scotland. I'll now, without further ado, introduce you to our speakers. On my far right is Achaso Moreno, also known as Taz. She is an actress. She was born and raised in the Basque country, and she's obviously a fluent speaker of both Basque and Spanish, not to mention English. Taz has been living in Scotland for over 20 years now. She's an actress, performer with wide experience of the theatre, and just a generally groovy person. As is Lucy Beth, who's next to her. And Lucy is a writer and performer from is it Aberdeenshire? Inverurie, Aberdeenshire. She is born and raised in the Doric language tradition, and is a kind of expert on Scots, Doric, and is a wonderful performer and writer. And next to her is Delina McLennan, another wonderful performer, actress, writer, doyen of Gaelic theatre and Scottish theatre in general. And right next to me is the, are you still the canon?
No.
No. The former,
The current one.
the former Scottish Poetry Slam champion, is that right? Former? Yeah. Hamish MacDonald, who is also a very experienced playwright and is in fact the founder member of Dogstar Theatre Company. It's not me, it's him. So Hamish has been crucial to the development of theatre in the Highlands. He's written a number of outstanding plays, including Factor 9, which is a play about the contaminated blood scandal, which has had a major impact on the campaign for justice for the victims of that appalling criminal, one might say, scandal, which has affected the lives of so many thousands of people, hundreds of thousands probably across the world. Hamish was also the first Scots Scriever appointed by the National Library of Scotland about 8 years ago, was it?
2015 to 2017.
Yeah. And so clearly he is an authority on the Scots language. He was born and raised in Clydebank, and then he ended up here when he was about 19. And he's been annoying us ever since. So without further ado, Hamish is actually going to start speaking. So we're talking about Scotland's theatrical languages. What are the barriers to the use of languages other than the dominant language, which is English, of course, in Scotland? There, in the little blurb you might have read in the programme, there are apparently over 150 languages spoken in Scottish homes, but very few of those ever appear on our stages. But I'll just hand over to you now, Hamish, and thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you. I'll continue to annoy you. Well, Matthew mentioned barriers to language, and in Scots generally, there's really two major barriers in my estimation. And one is economic disenfranchisement, and the other is perception of the language itself, and they kind of go hand in hand in a lot of ways. And you may well have seen that Peter Capaldi had an article which was published in the Observer last week, and it's caused a wee bit of a stushy in the mainstream media, and you've maybe heard comments on it or seen some of the comments in the other papers. And he basically was writing about his discomfort at how the arts and the acting profession in particular has become dominated by what he calls smooth fakers. And he basically was saying that the acting profession has become entirely infused and dominated by the better off in society, the rich basically. And he makes the point that he could never have done what he did. Peter Capaldi, born 1958, same year as me. He ended up going to Glasgow Art School, getting a BA, and he makes the point that this would never ever have been possible without what was then the student grant that was available throughout Britain, when anybody could get further education for free. And so he's become, concerned about how this has eroded representation of the working class in the arts, and he doesn't see it improving in any way. And when it comes to Scots, for all sorts of socio-linguistic reasons, is pretty much a working class language. And yes, we still have university tuition fees in Scotland, but we also have exorbitant accommodation costs, fuel poverty, food poverty, all that stuff. So who, is going to have the confidence, thoroughly future debt to pursue, even with those factors in place in Scotland, to pursue a potential risky career in the arts? And the demographic of Scots speakers, the way it is, that disenfranchises Scots speakers to a large extent, because it's basically a working class language. And really there's a big question to be asked: who's going to ensure or strive to ensure that we even can maintain what level of economic subsidy we've got for education, for further education and for the arts in Scotland? So that's a big question. I know we can't have a crystal ball look into the future, but it's a major consideration if we want Scots and the working class to have a say, and not to be part of this democratic deficit where the arts and the spoken word and the literature and everything that goes with it is dominated by the better off, for the better off. How can we keep theatre, because theatre is a used to express idea, and we have to maintain that theatre. And if we lose Scots theatre or any minorities, and if it doesn't counter the dominant force, where would we be? When you look at the canon of modern Scottish theatre, and just a couple of examples: Gregory Bartlett's Lochhead, Morna Young's adaptation of Dracula in a rich Doric voice,
Pearson. Pearson.
What did I say?
Yeah.
Oh, Morna Pearson, sorry, beg your pardon. If we lose that essential voice and representation in theatre, we basically lose our identity. We lose an essential stream of where we can express ourselves. So I realise Scots is the perception of Scots, it's always difficult because even despite getting Scots into the school curriculum in Scotland, depending where you are and who your head teacher and your teacher happens to be, it's still a real uphill struggle to convince people of the worth of Scots. You know, you get crazy misrepresentations. You know, it's the way our Wally talks, and you know, it's the language of the slums and all this stuff. So there's a constant battle to champion the representation of Scots. So it's I'm really thinking about, not about the present, I'm thinking about the future, and where do we go from here? You know, where's the political will, where's the economic will to try and help us maintain the rich and diverse languages that we have? And are we going to end up in the future with just, you know, smooth fakers and worthless fakes? You know, that Peter Capaldi's observing in the circles that he's moving in. So I guess there's more questions than answers there, as the old Johnny Nash song goes. The one of the lines in that is, the more I find out, the less I know. But, yeah, that's just a few kind of thoughts on, you know, Scots and theatre.
Thanks. Well, that's great. I mean, yeah, that does throw up questions, and we will discuss those questions, and maybe there are some answers coming from our next three contributors. But can we turn to Lucy, and I'm sure that you can follow on quite effectively as yourself being a Scots-speaking person. Thank you.
Hamish raised some brilliant points there, and I'll be expanding upon a few of these in this wee speech I've prepared for Aberdeen. So according to a recent Scottish census, over 1.5 million people speak Scots, and that makes it a really strong marker of people's identity in the present day. The highest percentage of Scots speakers are reported to be in Aberdeen and Moray, where Doric, a traditional dialect, is primarily spoken by working class people from rural farming and fishing communities. The combined areas of Aberdeenshire, Aberdeen City and Moray constitutes to about 14% of the Scottish population. Doric can be traced right back to the 14th century, and gradually it has evolved distinctive lexical, phonetic and grammatical structures over time, and it has appeared in plays and performances over time. For example, Gavin Grieg's 1894 play Main's Wooing was described as a drama of northern rural life with music, and several plays written wholly or partially in Doric have followed since then. So for example, Charles Barron's 2005 play Among the Cras remains an available teaching choice as part of the drama curriculum in the Scottish Curriculum for Excellence. Similarly, Sheena Blackhall's play The Broken Heart was a play that was commissioned by Gordon Menzies Productions, and that was for BBC Education's Around Scotland, A Tongue in Your Head production, and that was televised in early 1995. Even though throughout history Doric has resisted major change and dodged the lasting effects of language homogenisation, there is an ongoing media perception that Doric is dying. This is being contested and discussed in the academy. But since discovering North Sea oil in the 1970s, Aberdeen has been in a state of flux, with individuals introducing their own dialects into the previously Doric-dominated northeast of Scotland. Many Aberdonians have consequently had to dilute their native dialect within their own region to remain intelligible. And consequently, Doric has been predicted to be dead by the end of the century. The life expectancy of a male in Scotland is 74, and the life expectancy of a female is 78, which suggests that the last Doric speaker has already been born. This sounds dire, but contemporary performance practices are reinforcing that Doric is certainly not dead yet. Dialects remain relevant when they are represented in recognised and respected domains like educational and theatrical settings. What seems to be the case in the art sector is Doric is not progressing like the Glaswegian dialect. There has been a shift from this trend in recent years. Previous trends were that dialects were reserved for pantomime characters, but the National Theatre of Scotland's production of Black Watch subverted this. What it did was it staged the experiences of Glaswegian veterans who served in Iraq, and this gave a positive representation of the Glaswegian dialect. Several productions have continued this positive trend. For example, Ailey Loan's 2020-2023 play Moorcroft was on tour for a second time, but not all Scots voices have received the same treatment. For example, Disney's 2012 film Brave features a Doric-speaking character who is portrayed as foolish and completely unintelligible. Even though Doric is currently spoken by a large percentage of the Scots-speaking community, representations like these reinforce negative perceptions about Doric speakers. To prevent this socio-linguistic phenomenon from prevailing, there has been an artistic inclination to help preserve marginalised dialects. The National Theatre of Scotland has committed to supporting minority language artists through its development programme annually. Several contemporary practitioners aim to preserve Doric. Elgin's very own Morna Young, whose birthday is today, by the way, happy birthday, Morna. Morna has authored conventional plays like I, Elvis and Netting, but she used a verbatim approach to create her 2019 production of Lost at Sea. She used the Doric voices and songs of fishermen to dramatise stories from northeast fishing families. Similarly, Shane Strachan's The Shelter was inspired by conversations that he overheard from Aberdonians in bus shelters. Doric is present in current Scottish theatre productions, like Morna Pearson's Dracula, Mia's Reckoning. That's a reimagining of Bram Stoker's classic novel, and that was on tour until the tail end of 2023. Katie Barnett and James Sigurdsson's jukebox musical, My Doric Diary, was remounted and toured Scotland throughout the autumn of 2023. These works are all notable as they showcase Doric's presence in current theatre productions. And these performances contribute to a network of activity that are keen to represent and continue to render Doric present. Ongoing broader impact activities are encouraging young people to learn about Scots languages. The Scottish Government's Learning Language in Scotland, a 1+2 approach policy, aims to give students opportunities to learn a language bar English, and this strengthens the relevance of Scots in the curriculum for excellence. Considering the ongoing consultation of the Scots Languages Bill, the University of Glasgow's recent The Future of Scots Languages Symposium, and the Fitz-Doric A book discussion at Souter Festival of Words demonstrates that there's an ongoing knowledge-sharing network that aims to make meaningful contributions to the discourse surrounding language planning, and this gives a forecast to the type of languages that we will see in the theatre. Initiatives have been established so people are encouraged to continue Doric, like Culture Initiative, Scots Language Board, Film Festival, support for Uric in the arts life. This backdrop reinforces of the dialect strand that exists as part of my practice, 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 part of my practice, as a my practice, as a practice, as a practice, as a performer. I'm a performer in Aberdeen. I'm a native Doric. I was lucky in PGT to study on the University of Glasgow's Lit Theatre Performance, Lit Theatre Performance, Lit Theatre Performance, Lit Theatre Performance, Theatre Performance, Theatre Performance, Theatre Performance, Theatre Performance, Theatre Performance Practices course. I graduated with distinction in December. Master's degree to explore how using voice could be used to perform additional performance in Doric. This was the foundation for my practice as research project, my dissertation. For this, I created and performed my own solo show in Doric. It's called Fittin' In or Fan Out, and it made its professional debut at Vivid Roots Collective's Roots Festival in September 23 down the road at the Spectrum Centre. My project was supervised by playwright Dr. Graham Etoff, and I also received professional mentoring from Richard Gregory. He's from Quarantine Theatre in Manchester. The summary of the show is as follows. Rini is inviting you, her work colleagues, over to her flat for drinks. Her flat is going to be demolished in the morning, so she's having one last party to celebrate. Rini is not the ideal host. She has lived a lonely life, and in an attempt to connect with her guests, she continually implicates them into participating in activities that she thinks will uplift the party. Rini implies that her life has been exciting and fulfilling, but gradually the guests will come to realise that she has had to alter her identity and suppress her dialect to fit in, and she is now in a state of crisis. When I was devising the show, I wanted to create a performance that featured a Doric-speaking character who defied preconceived stereotypes. I aimed for the audience to relate to Rini's predicament and understand that the comedy came from her desire to connect rather than her Doric-speaking identity. Kind of in a similar style to Beverly from Abigail's Party by Mike Lee. This exploration was crucial because it pushed me to create a performance in Doric that explored why someone may want to suppress their dialect before realising the need to reclaim and preserve their dialect. I had to do that without being too academic. I had to make sure that the show still had aesthetic value to it. So to do that, I used Doric monologue, poetry, and actor musicianship to represent Doric, as these methods are favoured for conveying meaning insightfully. I was influenced by Robert Lepage and his perspective that theatre makers should use different theatrical approaches to create stimulating work. To continue to speak in the mother tongue is a privilege, and later on tonight I'm lucky enough to be performing 4 poems by Caroline Fowler. She's a poet that I've admired for many years, and I really hope that you can come along and enjoy some of the events later on and come and see the Ceilidh later tonight where I'll be performing. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Rosie. That was really fascinating and interesting and very well articulated description of the current status of Doric, I suppose, in the wider Scottish culture. So thank you so much for giving that to us. We'll now move on to Dolina McLennan. Dolina, I'll just wait till you're comfortable there.
Yeah, a sip of water.
Yeah, have your sip of water. And please do respond if you wanted to what you've heard, but also just tell us what's on your mind.
Well, I was brought up not speaking English until I went to school. And I'm very old, and there weren't any English speakers around at all, except when posh people came home on holiday in the summertime, and they had most peculiar accents, and the children especially who were brought up in Glasgow, their parents still spoke Gaelic, my cousins, but their cousins' children had this awful accent that I couldn't understand a word of. And the same thing happened when I brought my children home. They didn't speak Gaelic, they were brought up in Edinburgh, and their father didn't speak Gaelic, but they understood it, and they know the background to it, which I think is very important. But my daughter Jane was the same age as her cousin Donnie, and when she tried to get up on the couch beside him, he would shove her off and shout, "No Jane, Idir." Now, Idir means at all, no Jane at all, and he would push her. So, no, I didn't even know the word no or yes or anything else. The next generation, Donnie knew how to say no, but he also had Gaelic mixed up with it. But there's always been a mocking of languages. The person who doesn't speak your language mocks you. You're speaking of it. And that happened to Gaelic an awful lot. people would say, oh, I love listening to the Gaelic news. I don't understand a word, but I just listen to it so that I can hear helicopter. You haven't got a Gaelic for helicopter. I said, what's the English for helicopter? What do you mean? I said, it's not an English word. Helicopter. Oh, yes. So you got this mocking thing of your speech from all sides. I'm guilty of it because my ex-husband had a job in Leith with young children, young adults who were getting, they were on a £40 a week scheme or one of those schemes, and he decided that rather than give them their wages, that he would put it in a bank for them and give them a card so that they could maybe learn to save or, you know, spread it around. And this young boy came back and he said to him, did you get your money? And he said, no, And this has become, and I'm guilty of it because we think it's very funny, because he put his card in and it ate it, but and it's very funny actually. But this mocking of other people's languages and their way of speaking does go on. And I wasn't aware of Scots language at all in any form, apart from little bits of Doric, only I didn't know it was Doric, and that was from the fishermen who used to come into Stornoway. Came from a fishing family myself, but when I was in the Nicholson, we didn't get home at weekends. From the Uig and the Lochs, children were too far away to get home at weekends, so we used to walk around, and the fishermen from the East Coast always came into Stornoway at the weekends, and that's where I heard this very strange language. Didn't know it had a name, it was just the way the fishermen spoke, you know. And but that was the first awareness of any other dialect except English, Gaelic first, and then English when I went to school. And we learned English as she spoke. We learned English without any slang, correctly. And we learned poetry. We didn't learn Burns. We weren't introduced to Burns in the Nicholson for some reason, but we were introduced to all the English poets. And for me, Gaelic poets, which was wonderful because I finished up doing my higher Gaelic and Duncan Van McIntyre and my higher English on Chaucer, having gone to school without any English. But we missed out on the Scots bit for some reason. Now this is pre-Solly MacLean and pre-Ian Crichton Smith I'm talking about. I said I'm very old. But the poems we learned, then I came to Edinburgh and got very quickly involved in the beginning of the folk movement, and had the privilege of spending many, many, many months in the company of Jeannie Robertson, Jimmy Macbeth, old Willie Scott from the Borders, and that was my introduction to Scots language. And I remember I knew the Battle of Harlaw because we had got it to recite at school, but in English. But when Jeannie Robertson sang it, the poem, it came alive for me. You know, it was a totally different. It was magical. It wasn't boring, and you could visualize it through her amazing diction and her way of singing. So, and many other of her songs, and naughty songs. There were naughty songs in Scotland. Belle Stewart was the queen of the naughty songs. And we loved those, of course, because Gaelic is full of naughty songs. So the similarities got together in my learning. And then, not so long ago, it was during, oh yes, I got introduced to Aberdeenshire, because my brother-in-law was a vet in Dunecht. And I got to learn. It was a very funny. We arrived there. I was flitting from Dumfriesshire, which I got another aspect of language, to Dunecht, and David sent me to the shop next door for cigarettes, and the woman in the shop was very broad, speaking, and I got the cigarettes and I brought them back and gave David the cigarettes and the change, and then the woman from the shop came to the door and she said something that's still with me to this day, though I hadn't a clue what she was saying. She said, "Did I swag you for the fox?" And I said, "Sorry." No, I didn't. I said, "Sorry, I don't. Did I swag you for the fox?" Did I swing you for the fox? Did you overcharge me, in other words? But I just love that expression. And David used to take me on round to farms with him, pretending I was a veterinary student. Sometimes he would make me, when it was stitching cows and things, he would make me to hold something and the blood would be tripping off me, and I wasn't a vet student at all. But I would hear the farmers speaking, and I was lost at the beginning, but I got to know their speech patterns over the years, so I'm very familiar with Scots now. And of course, Hugh MacDiarmid's poetry was very, very important. Thereby hangs another tale. There was some word in one of MacDiarmid's poems that academics spent hours working out what it was, and somebody said, "Why don't you ask him?" And somebody asked him, he said, "I made it up." It was typical MacDiarmid as well. Now, during the lockdown, I got this phone call to audition on Zoom for the auditions on Zoom, and then they told me that I had the part. And I was horrified, how would I do it? So I got in touch with several Doric speakers and got on with it. But the wonderful thing was that there was something that had happened, and I had the script. Directors, I had the script for 6 weeks. So I got to know not only the language, but I got to know the woman. And she was an arbitrator altogether. And she swore like a trooper, which was wonderful to be able to do it officially, you know. And she was lying on the floor and she couldn't get up. The trouble was I was rehearsing on Zoom, and I live in a flat. And the swearing was quite terrible. So I had to put a note on the door. I said, "If you hear Dolly screaming," I said, "Pay no attention." It's rehearsing. Especially when I say, "Hey neighbours, a fondue, can I get up?" "Ah, yeah, bastards." You know. And they're not, they're very nice. But this character was incredibly funny. And the postman came and he couldn't hear her either. But we were being interviewed by Janice Forsyth, and she had asked the director how was Dolly's accent. And I said, "Now you must remember that this woman came from Lewis originally. She came to work to get herring all those years ago, and now she's an old woman, and she's still got the blast of the Gaelic language about her." So, we was at that. But it was fantastic fun, and it was filmed, and you could buy it for £10 for the 24 hours. But it went, during lockdown, it went to theatre, so you could buy it for Eton Court, you could buy it for Mull Little Theatre, you could buy it for Stirling for £10. And some friends of mine got all dressed up to go to Eton Court and sit on their couch with a bottle of wine and you had it for 24 hours. So it was a great success. It was really good fun, and I didn't feel guilty. I thought I would feel guilty doing somebody else's tongue, you know, but I didn't. So I hope I did right. Like last night, I made a few notes, but I never looked at them last night. I'm just wondering. Gaelic language itself is going through a phenomenal awakening. There's more children learning Gaelic than ever. There's nursery schools, there's Charaid, there's primary schools, there's secondary schools. But, I've got a big but, most of the people who are teaching it learned it themselves. And the language is becoming robotic because the people who learned it don't know the origin of their words, and they're losing the idiom, because Gaelic is full of idioms, short words, short phrases for long speeches, and ways of saying things. And not in the past, the people who learned it, like Colin Spencer, Sir Ian Noble, those are the people who just were, you'd never believe they were learners. They went into the community and they lived in the community, one as an artist, one as a landowner, but who cares, and started the college. But they lived in the community and learned the soul of it. Whereas now it's the words that are being taught. And when you lose the soul of the language, the words become robotic. And this is what's being passed on in a lot of, not all teachers, I must say, but quite a lot. It's losing its guts, in other words, its heart.
Is that, sorry to intervene, but is that because there aren't enough native Gaelic speakers?
No, they all going to BBC Alaba. It pays better than teaching. Anybody who can get a job in the media goes to the media rather than go to teach.
But is that a reflection of there being a crisis in the actual numbers of people who are actually speaking Gaelic in Scotland overall?
I don't think so.
Right.
It's just that the people who are speaking it learned it as a second language. And didn't learn it in the community.
So would you suggest that somehow there needs to be a greater presence of Gaelic culture in Scottish life?
Yes.
You know, in the round, as it were.
Yeah, but the thing is that with modernisation, so many of our words are lost because fishing's gone, and the weaving's nearly gone, and the craft work is gone, and all those things have their own words and their own idioms and their own way of life. And I suppose even in the community, those words are lost, even for native speakers. And computer language is coming in rather for the younger people rather than the craft language. So it's going generally, I suppose, in every culture, not just Gaelic.
Sure.
And it's Duolingo, it's Gaelic. There's millions of people learning Gaelic on Duolingo. God help what kind of Gaelic it is. But I believe people say that they're enjoying it, so that's fine. I'm quite happy with that. Let's see what else I wrote down here. Oh yes, there's everybody thinks there should be an H in every after every M in Gaelic. There's no neuter gender in Gaelic. It's just male and female, and the adjective is only has an H for females. Try and explain that to Parliament. People say M-H-O-R, that's more, it's not more. But people put it in, more is big, you know. But it's a we hear the great Gaelic poet, Mary Moore na Noran, Big Mary of the songs. That's correct, it's Mary Moore na Noran. But if it was a man, you would say dol mór, or dolachach mór, dolachach ban, not dolachach ban. So it's only the female gender that's what's the word? When you put the H in it?
Monition. Monition.
Yes. Yeah, something like that. I didn't learn Gaelic grammar. And the people spell Mary sometimes M-H-A-R-I, that's Mary. And that's the vocative case of Mary, when Mary is spelled M-A-I-R-I. When you're shouting for Mary, you shout, "Hey, Mary!" That's when you put the H in, when it's aspirated. But people stick in the H for no reason. But as I say, it's a female noun that's aspirated
Well, it's,
the adjective.
I'm sorry, I am going to have to stop you, Dolly, because time's moving on. But I think that, I think one of the things that what you've just said makes me think of is how language is something which doesn't stand still, actually.
No.
And the way that Gaelic has been kind of Anglified, if you like, through the domination of English, means that we do refer to quite a lot of, for instance, names of hills. There might be a Ben More that maybe should be called Ben Vor or whatever. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, those things can become to a degree irretrievable, mm-hmm. because they become so dominant within the common perception, mm-hmm. of a word or something like that.
Place names are full of it.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm kind of sorry to cut you off, but we do have a limited amount of time.
Yes.
So I would thank you very much. I mean, there's lots of stuff in there that we could really spend a lot of time on from all three of you so far. But we've got to give Taz a little go at this. So please, Taz.
Hi. So I think I'm just going to react to some of the stuff that you guys have been saying. Obviously, I grew up in 2 different languages, but it's none of the ones that you might know. Or you might. I grew up with Spanish and with Basque, and I learned a little bit of English as I was studying in school and all that jazz, as you do. But from being in the Basque country and thinking about Scotland or hearing about Scotland, I never knew that there was Gaelic or Doric, because no one tells you. It's English. That's it. To the point that when I first went to Glasgow, and I was having a bout with my pal, and big-eyed like that, first time in Glasgow, amazing, double-decker bus, great, let's go to the top. Sat there like that, and everyone was talking around us, and me and my pal go, "Oh, everyone speaks Gaelic in Glasgow." That's amazing, we didn't know. And it was Glaswegian. I found that out later. It's like, oh, that's English. No, that's Glaswegian. So through the years, I've been here now for a long time. And obviously, as I've been evolving in Scotland, I've been learning about the different languages and the kind of richness overall. And now, 20-something years down the line, I'm living in a city where probably there are 150 languages being spoken in homes. From my point of view, as an outsider, if you like, is that whole thing that you were talking about, that was so fascinating, the whole identity in your play, in your Doric play that you're talking about. So you come over here as a filthy foreigner and you want to connect. But also at the same time, I got my own identity. Now, I've been here for so many years, and the amount of people that tell me, "Oh, you haven't lost your accent, have you?" No, I haven't. Because why would I? Why do I have to do that? Of course I picked up things. I'm sure you can hear it now and again. But that's, if you like, that's what's happened with me coming here and getting all the different, all different influences and kind of like, getting them all in there. To me, that's kind of evolution of things, completely understand what you were saying with Basque. my other language. That has happened as well, the same as with Gaelic. Like a lot of the Spanish words have infiltrated in there. A lot of English words have are in there now. But it just means that the language keeps evolving. I'd rather it evolves than it completely disappears.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, I suppose, from my point of view, it's about looking at other languages as a richness that we have. Something that we, do you know, how lucky are we that there are people that speak all these other languages in Scotland? And how can we all benefit from that? How can we all enjoy that? And you know, very often, from my experience as an actor, sometimes I've been approached in rehearsals, randomly, suddenly someone says, "Oh, it'd be great if you said that in Spanish or in Basque." Why would I say that in Spanish or in Basque? Tokenism happens too. And we do tokenism and we don't get anywhere. Because then it becomes this little, it's like the Spanish flamenco dancer that everyone bought in their holidays in Benidorm or whatever, you know. I think it's more about being exposed to the different languages, but also allowing people to realize that it belongs to all of us, that we can all relish in them and enjoy them, and you know that it is part of this country, it is part of what's happening here now. And of course you need to look back and you know, appreciate what you had before. And in order not to lose it, it needs to evolve as well. I don't know what I'm trying to say with all of that. Lots of things. Yeah. To my shame, I haven't learned Gaelic yet. I will remember that. And I suppose now and again I do come up with an odd Scots thing, you know, living in Glasgow as well. But yeah, I just find it fascinating because when Matthew told me about this event, and I was thinking, oh God, what can I say? You know, I speak English barely, but then I was thinking, well, actually, in this country, how about we think about this? People really struggle with foreign accents, let alone another language. And when I say this, like, I was down in London for a few years, yeah, but as long as they are just up there as a token thing and blah, 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 you know, not too much. Just enough, but not too much. And I think it's a shame, because I think there's so much to enjoy from simply listening to a different language. And because it's not just the words, it's a whole thing, it's a whole door that opens suddenly for you.
Thanks very much. I mean, 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 I think it's you know, it's really interesting contributions from all four of you, and thanks so much for you. You know, I think one of it's interesting. Briefly, and then I'll open it. I think you know, in my own, just talking a little bit about my own experience. You know, I was brought up by a mother from. Who was brought up in a tenement in Glasgow, who incessantly told me that I needed to speak properly, you know, standard English, and I have friends who went to school in Skye in the 60s, who were punished for speaking Gaelic in the playground. Now things have moved on and are much better now, and I would say, you know, just the fact that we're having a conversation like this. I think that there is more of an embracing of languages happening. I think, you know, in spite of the difficulties and problems which you've all expressed, and the very strong assertion by Hamish that it's very much a political issue, language, which I think you can't really get away from. That actually I think there is a greater recognition in some ways of the diversity of languages, certainly in Scotland, than there used to be, and I think there is some reason for optimism because of that. I should say as well, you know, obviously we've talked about 150 languages. We've only really been discussing about 3 or 4 languages here, and we did intend to have a speaker on behalf of British Sign Language on our panel today, but unfortunately those people that we approached were not available. And that's the same for the BSL interpretation for this festival. It's been extremely difficult for us to actually find 2 BSL interpreters who can work with us on this festival, which is a sign that there is not enough training going on in that, and actually there's a very strong argument that BSL should be something that should be taught in schools to every pupil. But I just thought I needed to say that. But so please let's see what you've got to say on this. Jack, you're the first person with your hand up, so give us a go.
Hi there. I wanted to ask about, there was so much amazing stuff being said, all of you, just fantastic contributions. There's been a great deal of research that I've been seeing a lot about the vanishing of dialects and also the shrinking of minority languages. And then also I've been seeing a lot about a trend towards regional accents disappearing in the UK. And I was interested to see like surveys done 50, 80 years ago, and then the number of accents in the region shrinking down. But I was really fascinated to hear Delina's bit there of growing up and not knowing about these other languages, these other minority languages, and knowing Doric as the language of fishermen. Has this sort of interconnected, always online nature of our society driven this idea that we need to standardize our communication with one another, to be understood by one another? And by that standardization, that's anglicization. That's adopting to a rule of the majority. And then how do you fight back against that in a world that demands that accessibility and uniformity of language? And then finally, I think that what's talked about here was, and what was touched on by all the panelists in their own way, was this idea that language is tied as well to the loss of industries, be they crofts or fishing or oil or shipyards. Industries are nexuses of language. They're the place where the idioms are born. And language needs to be place as well as people. But I just wanted to thank you on that and kind of just throw some of this stuff out there, but thank you.
Does anyone want to respond to that?
As regards standardisation, whether we like it or not, we're still completely institutionalised in our language for the moment we go into primary 1, possibly even nursery. And as far as Scots is concerned, it's really spread about, as I touched on when I was speaking about who the head teacher is, where the school is, how that some schools will completely reject the idea of having Scots in the school and want tack 10 or recognise the curriculum, whereas you maybe get a really enthusiastic head teacher. And it can even break class. I mean, I've been at schools all over Scotland, mostly schools in Scots-speaking areas, but I've also been asked to the likes of St Leonard's and St Andrews, really, top notch. It was like getting into Hogwarts. They asked me to present the poetry prize and then do a wee workshop in Scots with the lanes, with the secondaries. And first of all, I had to sit in the poetry chair. It was this big wooden thing. It was like a throne. And then I had to present this poetry prize. It was a shield made out of melted down rupees for the days of the Raj. So it was all very imperialistic, but it was a very kind of forward-thinking school nowadays. And they were into having Scots, and I've been to Glasgow Academy as well, and they more enlightened people there. So it isn't all restricted to class. You people that want to have a better understanding of it, but like it or not, we're completely dominated by English and the desire to speak English and the impetus to speak English. when I went up to, Matthew mentioned I did the Scots Screever role for Radio Scotland, for the National Library, and they really pushed the publicity on it when I started. So I got interviewed in the likes of Channel 4 News. They were quite a bit patronising but very interested. BBC World Service, brilliant. A Christian radio station in England, English fella who'd grown up in Glasgow and had loads of Scots words. And then I went up to the studios here in Inverness to do, I think it was News Drive, the thing they had between 4 and 5. And I can't remember who the presenter was, but his opening gambit was, so you've been given this job for the next 2 years to teach Scots throughout Scotland. It's a waste of time, isn't it? I mean, that's in Scottish National Radio in 2015, you know?
Worse,
And you
yeah.
still get, it's worse now. I mean, Radio Scotland's, I mean, how is that how does that represent Scottish voices? I mean, Stuart and Tam on a Saturday, okay, you get a bit of banter, a bit of Scottish banter. Other than that, I mean, Frida Morrison's got the, who knows that there's a Scottish radio channel? One person. Because it's a podcast. You have to subscribe to it, and Frida does a brilliant job.
She's good.
Fantastic. But it's not in the public consciousness or imagination. And that really gets to me. And Taz was also speaking about stereotyping, you know, and even in Scottish productions on the TV, I think you still get a horrendous level of stereotyping. You know, the Glaswegian Heartman still exists and all that. And theatre and drama can absolutely open our eyes to how wonderful our own voices can be. I mean, I remember 1976, I was 17, I was working in I served an apprenticeship in a machine shop in Glasgow. And there had been a play for today, had the first Peter McDougall play on. It was about the Orange Lodge and the Orange Walks and all that, just another Saturday it was called.
Amazing.
It was a complete revelation to have Scottish voices in the telly, genuine Scottish voices. And I came into work the next day and just about everybody in this factory who would never have watched Play for Today, did you see that last night? You know, fuck's sake, you know. It was about the Orange Walk and all this part or so. Unfortunately, progressed in casting. And a big struggle with all feel we're very institutionalised. You know, really by what I hear today, you know, what's going on. But when I look at social media and stuff, I just took my head in my hands when I see, see Scottish people that speak Scots, they're writing Scots, you know. So we'll still get a big battle, you know. I think anyway.
That's. I think you're kind of talking about what we know as the Scottish cringe.
Exactly, and not being comfortable in your own skin, and this is where you need theatre and broadcasting to give you cultural confidence.
Yeah, and I think, you know, theatre can do that. Theatre can also do the opposite. So, you know, it's beware.
I was taught a Gaelic word by a 7-year-old Chinese boy in a Gaelic school in Edinburgh, a primary school. And I was doing drama with them, and I was saying they'd been sleeping all winter, and they were all something what comes out of the ground in spring, and I had them all lying on the floor, and I said, "What are you?" And she said, "I was a flower," and she would get up and be a flower, and somebody else would be a tree, and somebody else would be something else, and there was this little boy, and he wouldn't get up at all. And I was prodding him, I said, "Dave Hunitzer, what are you?" And eventually, after quite a while, he said, "Granyak." And I didn't know what that was because we didn't have hedgehogs in Lewis.
So he wasn't going off.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely anecdote. Good on ya. Right, okay. I'll remember that. Any more contributions to the floor?
Yeah, I just sort of wanted to say what you were saying about stereotyping and like our use of like Scots language and stuff. And it was something really powerful for me, was actually quite a recent production that I saw, that was the Jamie Lloyd Cyrano that they did with James McAvoy's Cyrano. And like absolutely he's the name, and I know that, and that was a big part of the reason why I feel like there's this resistance to making the Scot be like the comedian. It's always like the comic relief, and one of the most disgusting things I ever saw, and no offence to anyone, it was a wonderful production of Life is a Dream at the Lyceum, but you know, they had this speech in the opening and they spoke all these languages and nobody laughed, and then she said it in Scots and everyone laughed, and I was sick to my stomach, and I was like, that's not funny.
I laughed a little bit at the use of Spanish now and then. It was pretty poor.
I actually looked around, like I was like, really?
Yeah.
And then when I went to see Cyrano, the most intelligent person on the stage was a broad Scottish, yes Glaswegian, but broad Scottish speaker. He was the most intelligent person, and you know, it did really, really well in England, and everyone understood him, and maybe that's because it's James McAvoy and they put the effort into understanding him. But a lot of the time people go, but I don't understand what I don't get it, I don't understand it. Even Scottish people will say that sometimes about Doric, you know? Oh, but that's not, yeah, okay, I'm from Aberdeen, but I don't speak Doric. And I was like, of course you do, of course you understand it. You maybe don't know it to read it, because you've only ever heard it, but of course you understand it. And I think as well, what you were saying about idioms and that musicality, it's like, that is reflective of the landscape. The way that we talk is, and why it's important for authenticity is because that gives you a full rounded, properly coloured in picture of a place, is that language. So then in Scottish theatre it's sometimes quite frustrating for me that, okay, and specifically talking about Morna Pearson's Dracula, like I know Morna's from Murray, and but then the team was all quite English. So it's like, where's that, the creative team I mean? Like where's that line, and how can we be sure that Doric is being handled properly, is in the right hands, or is being, when, is it just tokenism? Well, we've done something in Doric now, we put all this money into something that was written in Doric, but did you really put, I don't know. That's my sort of thoughts on the subject, but it's something that, yeah, I would like to see a lot more of, and to be able to not be the funny character or the hard man or the junkie or the and yeah, there's naturally a lot of like we're funny people as Scots, we're funny, but yeah, we're more than that too. Yeah, sorry, I don't
Thanks
really know
very
if I
much.
had a point.
Thank you. No, that was great. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, I just want to say, Dolly, you talked earlier about you know, Gaelic teaching and about the sort of level of where, you know, Gaelic, there's been a growth in it, but maybe the quality isn't there in the same way because of the teachers having been learners rather than being native, and the whole conversation about so much of language comes from communities and from industry and from all those places. I think that whole thing where when you're trying to, and the Gaelic World's worked really hard to try and up the numbers and try and encourage people, encourage it and see it in a positive light again. But until it's more than just being done in an academic setting and in schools and colleges, and I think it does happen to an extent within Gaelic. So there is things like, you know, a sporting organisation that do all their activities in Gaelic to allow children not to just be speaking it in school, but actually going and doing their sports and doing their outdoor activities, and the Fage teaching their music activities through the medium of Gaelic. And I think, you know, so if we don't have those industries existing anymore and that language being natural within those settings, then we need to ensure that all of these things our young people take part in are being delivered by people who do use the language, who do use their own dialects, who do use their own languages and so on.
Well, that's the Phasian movement comes into that.
Yeah, absolutely.
They learn their piping background from Gaelic pipers quite often, you know, from the MacDonald brothers and so on. So that happens. But it's the way I came across this was a friend's granddaughter was doing a higher Gaelic, and she gave me her essay to read, just to help her along, and I couldn't understand it, you know. And this was higher Gaelic after primary school and secondary school, and wasn't her fault, you know. But she couldn't understand. I said, "No, why did you write it that way?" She said, "That's the way we were told to write it." And it was wrong, you know, in that word. But it's being taught and it's being spoken, and that's the main thing.
Absolutely.
Though I regret the passing of the idiom, especially. Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say, I suppose, was just about that whole thing where, you know, I go to a lot of theatre, and I would go to an Edinburgh Festival, and I was likely to go and see a show in Polish. I don't speak any Polish. I don't have any experience of that. I'll still go and see it because theatre is one of the mediums that allows things to be shared that isn't just about the words, that it's about every part of the experience. And in the same way that in a language immersion school, teachers are using gesture and so on to ensure that language is passed on and to ensure that the people understand it, then theatre has a role to play in allowing all sorts of languages and all sorts of stories to be shared, because it's got so many other, the lighting and the costume and the gesture and all of those things are added to it. So it just feels again that theatre has a really important role, and the art generally has a really important role in ensuring the language is kind of respected and shared, and that we're not scared to not know exactly what's happening and to still participate and to still enjoy.
Yeah.
Gaelic drama for the kids, really a great draw for them, isn't it?
Yeah,
both.
A Doric speaker, I'm from the same place as Lucy. And when I am an artist and I have taken Doric to where I studied in Dundee, and I've shared it there and it's enjoyed there, and people have gone, wow, that's fascinating. But nobody enjoys it as much than the Doric plays I've been in performed in Aberdeenshire. That's where the language is. People don't laugh like they do when Doric people are listening, because that's the connection. You think about when my mum was young in Huntly in the area, there would be cornkisters, and they would go to the village halls and they'd perform there. And that's when you try and take that kind of aspect and move it around Scotland or share it with a wider audience. Is that what we're trying to do? Is that how we celebrate these languages? Do we take them with us to our big institutions? Go, everyone look at that, and everyone goes, great, cool. Or are we wanting them to nurture them in the communities that they come from? Is it the community's responsibility? Is it the individuals? I was just wondering if, as the panel have obviously all very well travelled and they've come from different places, I just wanted to hear your thoughts maybe on location and being an individual that's taken your language and moved. Do you feel like it's as important to represent it here and share it with a group of people, or is it important to represent it where you're from, like the home, like you're speaking about the spirit of Gaelic? It will never be as strong as where you've come from, that spirit that you're speaking about. So I just wondered what you thought about that, if that makes sense.
Can I say something about that? Just linked to Basque language, no, not just Spanish language. So Basque was, Spain had a dictatorship, so Basque language was banned by the dictator. He was alive for 40 years. So people couldn't, if you spoke Basque, you would go to jail, basically. So there was a time where it looked like Basque was going to disappear completely. Now, Basque originally was just passed by, it was an oral culture. Very later on, people in the church started writing it down, but it was mostly just spoken by the people. So it was very close to disappear, and then in the 80s there was like a bit of an ignition of it. But what happened was, two things happened. So, because you asked me earlier about broadcasting and radio and TV in the Basque Country, I was very surprised when I came here that there was no Gaelic channel, for example, or whereas and I moved over here in '99, and the Basque television was already established then. So that was one thing. But what happened most importantly, and is linking with what you're saying, is that there was this big promotion of the language in the communities. So all these initiatives started by which you could go and learn Basque for a very little, like symbolic price. Very, very little price. You know, the money was not even a thing. And so people started kind of slowly but surely going to these night classes and blah, blah, blah. And the whole idea was, even if you know this little bit, use it. Use it when you go to the shop. Use it when, you know, because you might get someone that actually responds to you. Or as a new Basque speaker, you might learn, you know, I'm just a new, because we have that old Basque speaker or new Basque speaker. And so as a new Basque speaker, you might say, I'm a new Basque speaker. And the person will slow down, but you know, and to this day still, there is this one initiative that happens every year where people get like these 2 stickers, so you can be one that understands only, and then you can be also one that speaks. So you can take your wee sticker to the shops as a, I can't speak it, but I can understand it. And the person in the shop might speak to you in Basque. So, you know, it seems to me that it needs to go, great of course in the academia, of course, but at the end of the day, a language needs to be alive. Because otherwise, you know, we will be, I mean, Latin, great, love it, I studied it for many years, very useful, no one speaks it. So it's a dead language, it's a dead tongue. What you need is people to use it, even if it's this little bit. So, yeah, it just kind of like remind me of that there was a massive kind of community, like taking it to the communities, of course in schools as well, you know. But taking it to the grown-ups, if you like, and going, yeah, you guys couldn't learn it because of the dictatorship. Oh, here's the way in. You know, and making people proud of it, and going, hey, this is something that is there for you. You can learn it. But also inviting others. The Basque Country, particularly the region I come from, masses of immigration from other parts of Spain. So Spanish speakers, no Basque speakers at all. But to invite those people as well and going, hey, you are here now. You might want to learn this too. And getting people in like that as well. You know?
Well, I think what you've just said and what you were saying is, it makes me think about how empowered or disempowered communities are. And a lot of that is another very political issue, because
yes,
because actually in Scotland and the UK in general, local government is disempowered. It's one of the weakest local government regimes in any European country. We have a very centralised state actually, and so that's got even worse in the last 13 years with the austerity policies of the Conservative government. And as a consequence, local authorities now are extremely weak. There are a number that have already gone bankrupt in England. There are going to be a lot more going bankrupt in the coming year, as far as from what I've read. And quite the reverse is what should be happening, as far as I'm concerned, to actually improve the democratic settlement for the people across the whole of the UK, never mind Scotland. But you know, we're quite a long way off from that, and from the kind of rather wonderful picture you planted in my mind of how your local community could really kind of flower from a linguistic perspective through cultural production. So you know, I mean, obviously that's been achieved, you know, quite remarkably, considering the 40 years of complete censorship that the Basque people experienced. And you know, that also made me think about the fact that Gaelic was banned as a public language for more than 50 years after the 45 rebellion, you know, and that has had a major impact on the Gaelic language ever since. But you know, there are ways of really kind of you know, embracing and promoting and celebrating language, even if you are communicating to audiences that don't have that language. We have technologies now that make it a lot easier in some ways to present you know, foreign language on stage. You know, Dogstar itself has done plays which have mixed Gaelic with English, which have mixed Swedish with English, which with our two Swedish friends here, they were involved in that production, and so you know, I think there are a number of positive aspects to what theatre can do to do that. Sorry, that's a bit of a speech from me. Anyone else want to speak from the floor? Phil.
Question about funding, I suppose. I'm not sure this is tokenism. I'm sure this is coming from the right place, but I wonder if it's got unintended consequences. When I'm applying for funding to do writing or productions or whatever, there's often a tick box saying, will this be in English, will it be in Scots, will it be in Gaelic? Actually, it might be in all three. Or there's bits of other languages in there as well, but it's sort of siloed then into these three sort of streams, which to my mind sort of then sort of silos them again rather than includes. And I just wonder if there's something there about tokenism. I'm sure it's coming to the right place. It's trying to promote these wider languages, absolutely fine, but it might have unintended consequences of being a bit too tick boxy or a bit too siloed, a bit too non-inclusive through trying to be inclusive.
Well, I think someone was saying to me yesterday after our speak out yesterday about how in some ways our cultural life has become far too dominated by those kind of arts administrative processes, and that does kind of in some ways suck the kind of life out of our culture. Yeah, there's a huge difference between what you put in a form and what you might put on a stage, and I think that's, you know, yeah, you can have this kind of objective, quasi or pseudo-scientific kind of analysis of things that are happening within your culture, but in a way, you know, there's far too much of that, and we don't need it in the way that people actually need stories and human beings talking to each other in a situation like this on a stage, you know, and there's a lot of that stuff that is just not quantifiable and is not measurable, and we've been far too dominated by this obsession with quantification and measurement ever since the National Lottery was launched, actually, I would say, in terms of my experience of writing art applications for funding. And that was about 26 years ago, 27 years ago. Sorry, anyone?
Can I counter that?
Yes.
A little bit. I mean, I do agree in general, but just slightly playing devil's advocate. Like, if you don't try and quantify, maybe not that, like who's getting the funding, and who, like, and then you can't then you can't gauge as, like, how what's not being represented or where the gaps are, or how you kind of. I think there's a necessary thing with fund that you have to be able to sort of quantify, to look at like who's getting the money and who's not getting the money, and what, and I mean, I think it's a necessary bureaucratic thing, and I think it does have like unintended consequences in terms of sound and stuff, but just slightly to play devil's advocate, that I think it's hard to give out that for money to
Yeah,
give
no,
out
I wasn't saying you shouldn't have any of it. But sure. Does anyone else want that?
To that, but I wanted to is a misinterpretation of anything. You often heard people, whether having a drama, sing Sláinte Mhór, yes? Sláinte Mhath is good health. Sláinte Mhór, big health, means absolutely nothing. But it's not Sláinte Mhór. Now, in Gaelic, the name Marion, in English, is translated as Mór, M-O-R, not Mór, as in big, but Mór, as in Mórach, you know, Sláinte Mhór. And that's what it means, and it's the aspiration of the female noun, Sláinte Mhór. And that means it's a Jacobite toast to Bonnie Prince Charlie when he was in drag. He was going over the sea to Skye. He was known as Morak. And it's a secret Jacobite toast to Slantivor. So there you go. It's a Jacobite toast to Bonnie Prince Charlie.
Thank you. I'm not sure that was a particular response to what you just said, but it was very entertaining all the same.
But it's a teaching and a misinterpretation of a popular Gaelic expression.
Yes, and we do need objective truth, if you like. So yeah, it's connected, I suppose, in that way. Any other thanks, Susie.
One last, it's not my funny. I'm interested in theatre's role, especially especially like bilingual or trilingual, and the interrelation of languages in a non-tokenistic way, and the role that theatre can have, especially Catherine, because you talked about like how much is understandable not through language as well. So, and I like, do you have any like particularly good examples of productions that have done that in a really creative, inventive, theatrical way that honours different languages and the interplay between them? And I don't, I'm just interested in that.
I got one experience of that.
Yeah.
One. In all the years.
Well, I mean, that says a lot, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a Scottish company actually, Birds of Paradise. Many years now ago. We did a play that was delivered at the same time in English and in BSL. So, believe you me, it was very hard work. I'm not fluent in BSL. I had to learn the script in BSL for the job. I was working with 2 BSL users. One of them was a performer in the show, the other one was an interpreter that was working with all of us as well. And we had to learn the script in the 2 languages, and we would deliver them in the 2 languages at the same time. So I'm saying the line in English, but I'm also signing it, which of course you bring us like that because grammatical is completely the opposite kind of thing. And the play was about, funnily enough, the play was about the languages lost in South America, in a particular country in South America. Layer again. So of course, Spanish come in, they murder everybody, they murder all the languages, and then the Spanish becomes the main language. But there were all these other languages as well, and all these other cultures that existed. So the play was about that. The way to kind of embody that was using these 2 languages at the same time. And I think that's the only time that I've seen that kind of idea done fully. Because it also requires an effort from us as performers that went beyond just learning the lines, or and obviously require an effort from the audience as well. And it also meant that the audience could be fully mixed, and everyone that was there could understand. But I thought that was a very interesting approach at using a different language or combining 2 languages in a play, for example. Yeah, and lots of the things that I've done where languages are used, sometimes it does feel a little bit tokenistic to me. Yeah.
Ian Finlay MacLeod did some pieces when he was kind of in his earlier writing stages, where he was writing pieces that were partly Gaelic, partly English, and partly in a completely made-up language, similarly to what you were saying about Hugh McDermott, where words actually didn't exist in either, but they somehow, having that mix of something within one text, opened it up in a completely different way to use an audience, both reading it and watching it.
There are Gaelic songs, half English, half Gaelic. They're known as macaronics. Yeah.
So which boxes did you tick from this?
Yeah, we did a play a couple of years ago that George wrote, George Gavin, who's sitting at the back there, where quite a lot of the text was spoken in both Gaelic and English. And yeah, did that work well? I think it It was all right. What do you think? Yeah, you were in it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I thought it worked well.
Yeah, I think. Well, we're fast approaching 3:30. I think we should stop now because I always think a maximum before you have an interval is 90 minutes, so that people can have a comfort break. So, and I would like to thank you all and thank our contributors, and please urge you if you're hanging around to go to our scratch session at 4 o'clock, which features new plays in development by Louis Watson, who is a Doric speaker himself, and Callum L. MacLeod, who is writes some Gaelic, and I think that'll be a fascinating thing to watch, especially in response to this. So what we've just heard. So thanks again, and a big round of applause to you as well as these great speakers.
He was so easy.